Europe!
Hello everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Dobro jutro svima.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Or as we say in Greece, kalimera.
Good morning, everybody.
Goedemorgen, Europa.
Good morning, Europe.
Foaie verde siminoc, ține știula pe loc. Și încă o dată, măi băieți! Două fire, două paie, iaciule Andra la bătaie. Și încă o dată, măi băieți! Hop, și așa, și așa. Două fire, două paie, iaciule Andra la bătaie. Și încă o dată, măi băieți! Hop, și așa.
We are very grateful indeed for this opportunity to be here today, to be able to work alongside so many talented people, because this will be, in all likelihood, one of the last groups to come to Euroscola from the United Kingdom. And we're looking forward very much to meeting all of you here today. Thank you.
We, as young people, think that it's really important for us to work together, united, so every person in the Union and the world can live in freedom, in peace, and have equal opportunities.
So we are here to learn, to improve, and to socialize with people from all over Europe. We cannot express with words how thankful we are to be here and how much fun it will be to be a part of this journey. Thank you.
That's wonderful. First of all, a very warm welcome to all of you to the European Parliament. I'm delighted to see such a turnout today, so many of you in the chamber. This European project is terrific. I mean, I myself am a French national born in France, but I'm a member for Germany in the European Parliament. And so this is my lived experience. I mean, I think that is the essence of European culture.
How do you imagine the Europe in 10 years?
Well, what I can imagine is that in 10 years we have new European treaties. I think that we are poised to introduce a United States of Europe. I think that we will have more democracy. We'll have the Commission as a government, that we will have a parliament and possibly a second chamber representing the governments and member states. But above all, most importantly, that we will have a Europe of the citizens, a Europe of the people, a social Europe, a Europe which will cater to the needs of all people, including people in the border regions of Europe who are not doing so well, are lagging a long way behind, need to catch up. So a kind of social Europe which helps them too.
How is the EU going to resolve the Middle East refugee crisis?
Well, that's
one of the really big issues where we have no real solution within the EU. I think that has to be acknowledged. I mean, it's very difficult to arrive at any kind of compromise or consensus, but I think we're going to have to do more when it comes to development cooperation within the EU. And I think it's a shame that apart from Luxembourg, no other EU member state has honoured the obligation they voluntarily entered into, whereby 0.7% of GDP would be spent on development aid or development cooperation. 0.7% of national GDP. As I say, apart from Luxembourg, there's no country that does that. And I think that would help resolving some of the issues, addressing some of the issues which are the cause of migration or exodus from these countries. So I think we've got to tackle it via the economy, I think. But I think we're talking about solutions that can't be put in place overnight. So I think within the EU, we've got to see how we can best address the issue or issues. And we are bringing pressure to bear on countries that are not prepared to take in refugees, as stipulated in European legislation. Here within the European Parliament, we heard from the Portuguese Prime Minister, who made an excellent statement, an excellent speech, and I think he earned thanks from all sectors of the European Parliament. According to EU legislation, some of the countries that are sort of digging in their heels should have taken in some 2,500 refugees from Greece or Italy, but others have taken in way beyond that number, some 10,000. So I think there are countries that are prepared to do something. There are other countries that are dragging their heels. They don't want to take in refugees. But I think we need the solidarity of all. We can't leave Greece and Italy alone wrestling with the problem. And if we're talking about migratory flows, where we'd have migratory flows into Eastern Europe, then we wouldn't want to leave countries in Eastern Europe alone with the problem either. We would want to show solidarity with them, but these countries then, in turn, have to show their solidarity with the current migration situation. It's a give and take.
What personally you would like to change about Europe?
Ach je, was würde ich gerne?
Oh dear, what would I like to change? Well, the way it operates, perhaps, the way it functions in the council. I wouldn't like meetings to be held behind closed doors so nobody really knows what's going on. I think that would be better in terms of transparency. We'd know who's responsible for what. I mean, I'd love to see that, for example, more transparency of council meetings. And I'd like to have a state, Europe, where European policy is being shaped by a European Parliament and a government that will be accountable to Europe's citizens. And I'd love to have transnational lists for European elections, for example, so we can have a real a genuine European electoral campaign. I mean, one step in that direction is the so-called Spitzenkandidaten, sort of the lead candidates, but that's not enough. I think we're going to have to continue to work on that, this issue of transnational lists. So there are quite a few things, as you can see, that I'd like to change, and I will continue doing my bit so they do change. What would a super-state Europe do better than the EU as it is presently configured with independent nation-states?
Ja, wir müssen immer mehr.
Well, I think you're the future. You're the future of the EU. You who are sitting here, you young people, it's your life, it's your future that's being shaped. And I think it is your task, it's your responsibility to shoulder political responsibility for what's happening within the EU. And the first thing I think is electoral law, electoral legislation, to use those possibilities so that democratic forces hold sway within the EU so that we can continue to shape the EU. And we can only do that together, but that's only possible if young people really get involved, participate, say what they want, shape decisions, and therefore shape the future of Europe as being advocated by Jean-Claude Juncker and the European Parliament. I mean, you're not the ones we should be targeting. You're here. You're participating in a Euroscola event. So therefore, you have an interest in Europe, but there are other young people that you need to sort of take along with you, as it were. Reach out to them so that they're involved in discussions as to what kind of Europe we want to see coming into being in the future. It's not going to be my Europe. I mean, I've got another 30 years perhaps ahead of me, or 40, who knows. But it's your lives really that are at stake or that are being shaped by the EU. So you're going to have to participate. You're going to have to sort of step up to the plate and bring your views to bear. Shape Europe as you see it should be, not the way I see it should be. I mean, I'm prepared to put across my own views, but it's for you really to put across your own views as to the kind of Europe you want to be living in the future. Hopefully a Europe of peace rather than a Europe of divisions, but it's going to be your responsibility, it's not going to be mine.
When will you be satisfied with the things you've achieved in Europe?
Ich glaube nie.
Never, probably.
Nie, weil es wird immer Probleme.
I think there will always be problems that need resolving. And a society, of course, is a living organism. And there are always new challenges that have to be taken up. And I think that's the aim of politics, surely, is to improve people's lives. But there'll always be areas where we have come unstuck or where things still need to be done. So I don't think for a politician you reach a point where you can say, that's it, it's all perfect. Close shop, leave the key under the mat, as it were. No, I'm not saying that because I'm going to remain in politics for some time to come. I think it's work in progress. And peace isn't static either. Peace can't be taken for granted, or it's not just a matter of course. I think when you get used to peace and fail to realize that you've got to support peace or protect and promote it, then you may lose it. So I think we need to remind ourselves that we need to improve people's lives so that tensions don't arise, the conflict doesn't arise. So it's certainly a question of work in progress. I think in the 80s, the 19s, at the turn of the century, I think we were just, we rested on our laurels. We're in too comfortable a position. We've got peace, we've got democracy, but I think we're now waking up to the fact that this is an ongoing battle, a struggle, and we should never rest if we really want to look to a prosperous and peaceful future. And I think what makes me really positive is that there are so many young people here, for example, today, who hopefully will want to take up the standard and continue to fight for peace and ensure that society evolves in the right direction. It'll never be ideal. There's always something better that one can achieve in the future.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President.
Firstly, we believe that sanctions should be imposed on organisations that don't make any effort to be environmentally friendly. However, we believe that we need to focus on promoting an eco-friendly economy, for example, subsidising the cost of renewable energy. We feel it is important to encourage pursuing sustainable economic development on a global level so as not to hinder the EU economics development. Our second question was, what policy should the European Union adopt on the environment and renewable energy? So we feel that the EU must implement a policy to move away from nuclear energy. We feel it's dangerous and in the long run not sustainable. We feel that we must reduce taxes on eco-friendly items, for example solar panels, electric cars and public transport. But also we must increase taxes on goods that are harmful for the environment, as well as the companies that produce them. For example, cars with high pollution rates. And finally, we must also introduce a policy to help the likes of car companies who produce high pollution products by giving grants for research and development of more eco-friendly products. Then our final question was, what can we do to change people's attitudes? Firstly, we propose to introduce a compulsory EU programme for all children and teenagers which raises awareness about the environment. We also propose to introduce an EU-wide return bottles incentive scheme and to lower food prices for goods that are going out of date. And finally, we believe that goals should be introduced for individual countries to reduce waste rather than an EU-wide goal. Thank you.
Our first proposal was that we introduced a scheme where our government could officially view and gather our online data in order to prevent acts of terrorism and other suspicious activity. We then proposed that there should be more awareness of human rights. It is the unfortunate reality in our world today and in the EU where not everyone is fully aware of their rights. And of course, this holds us back. We propose that human rights are taught at the fundamental level of kindergarten and a country's equivalent, but also that this information is readily available. We propose that brochures and virtual information is provided for anyone who wants to access information about human rights. We then discussed gender equality, We believe that there should be a regulation that every company releases a report on the wages of their workers. This is to eliminate a wage discrepancy. We firmly believe that neither women or men or any gender should be denied equal pay for equal work. Our final proposal for today is about fake news. We are living in an era where information is at our fingertips, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to determine the facts from the fiction. We decided that companies and official media and news platforms would have to be verified as to being honest and truthful mediums of information. Thank you.
So the group decided that festivals could be organised on a national and international level, which would include art exhibitions, musical or theatre performances, and film showings and other forms of celebration of art. The group also suggested that virtual reality could also be used in helping people to experience cultures which are not geographically close to them by virtually visiting museums or heritage sites. To develop the full economic potential of the cultural sector a way of developing the full economic potential of the cultural sector could be advertising. Companies could pay to be advertised during events or while people are using virtual reality. One suggestion was that there could be cultural education in schools, which could include a basic learning of other languages. The group decided that it's important that school students learn about their own cultures firstly and then about other cultures. School tours and multicultural festivals could be organised within schools as to provide a practical cultural education. It was agreed that a main impact of cultural heritage on international relations would be that people would learn to respect each other's cultures and would learn to coexist. Another impact could be that people learn about disappearing cultures, and this could lead to dwindling cultures surviving and being appreciated and acknowledged, as all cultures are equally important.
So the first point is about education, and my committee thinks that it is very beneficial to introduce politics in school, to create new programs, and this would lead to more young people going to vote, and in that case increasing the number of young people who vote, and this is related to the problem of Brexit, as it was mentioned earlier. The second point is, in future, European Union should reduce the difference between rich and poor countries. Of course, this is a very complicated issue, and at first we thought that it is very important to fight corruption in those poor countries. Of course, corruption isn't the only issue which leads that the poor countries are poor, but my committee thinks that it is very important to make the anti-corruption organizations more efficient in the European Union. And after that, it is very possible to invest more money into deprived countries, infrastructure, transport, and etc. So this is one of the future plans for the Europe.
So we propose that education should be for both adults and children. They should be taught about culture and language, and even refugees coming from different countries who are forced out of their countries to be taught social skills. So for children, have a set curriculum in which they learn about immigrants and integrate with them, so that they learn that they can have sympathy and therefore also reduces discrimination. For adults, have maybe in city centres, having different social interactions, even maybe play dates with their children to encourage integration. Our second proposal was travel safety. So many asylum seekers coming in from, for example, Iraq and Syria are travelling in really unsafe conditions. So especially in the Mediterranean, for example, first 6 months of 2017, there were 2,257 lives lost. So if we provide financial aid to provide boats and buses and supplies, which is pretty much mandatory, as it's a human right to have shelter. It's a human right to be away from war and to be safe. Another proposal was resettlement. So we proposed that you would spread them evenly depending on financial and space, like depending on the country. So for example, in Poland, there's lots of space, but they don't have a lot of finance. Therefore, if other countries finance it, then they can build shelter there for more refugees. Our final proposal were jobs. So refugees could get tax breaks when they first start working, and then once they've got a job, they can create economic growth, and that can therefore also fund education for their children. Thank you very much.
Well, Europe already has numerous programs to help the youth, like the Youth Employment Initiative, which helps people from 18 to 25 years old that are unemployed or just graduated. There's also Erasmus Plus for education and the Solidarity Corps, where you can volunteer. The problem we stumbled upon with these programs is that very few people knew about them. So our first proposition is that there should be more funding to get the word out about these programs and that the people can actually get the help they need. Secondly, we came across the problem that in many countries they ask for a lot of experience, which young people often don't have. Which brings us to the second proposition. There should be a mandatory internship for students at a university so they can get some experience and have a better chance in the work field. We also thought that corporations should be motivated more to hire young people. For this, we had the following proposition. The EU should advise their countries to lower the taxes for corporations that hire young people, so that they are motivated to hire them instead of the older, more experienced workers. We also wanted to motivate the young entrepreneurs and give them a chance to start their own business. So our proposition is that the EU should fund new businesses started by young people. Thank you.